High Seas Havoc. This was a game I was pretty excited about, looking at some screenshots, so much so that I made a point to go out of my way to get it for my Genesis collection. But then I started the game up and saw this screen, and let's be honest, this screen may as well say, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter." Okay, to Data East's credit, they did make one really good game, but there is that saying about the clock that's currently not moving having a correct display of time, because time will inevitably hit that value on the clock at least one time. I'm pretty sure word for word that's how the saying goes. But either way, I decided to plop in High Seas Havoc and give it a go. I ended up streaming this many months ago, before life kinda took away my ability to stream for a while. I really need to get back to that. And, well, for one thing, I was immediately disappointed that this is one of those games that stops you 3 levels in if you're playing on the easiest setting, because this game is kind of grim. But also, this game is not entirely what I first thought. See, I first thought this was going to be one of those games that is desperately trying to be Sonic. Turns out it's a game that's desperately trying to be Bubsy. And, you know, copy and paste what I just said about Data East with Bubsy. Although, to be fair to Bubsy's credit, that new one somehow looks like it kinda slaps. Although it also looks like it's channeling mad Sonic Adventure energy, so you know, Sonic Adventure is good is what I'm saying. And go play Spark the Electric Jester. But back to High Seas Havoc, it's kind of a mess of a game that feels like it could be good and just decides not to be at every turn. Now, the story follows a pirate seal named Havoc. He has a sidekick that you will never see in this game, except he's literally identical to Havoc in every single way, so I'm inclined to think genetic clone. Also, he wears a diaper. Are apparently living a life of peace while also buckling their swash amongst the high seas, which doesn't make sense because those two things are literally opposites to each other. Either way, one day, little baby clone Havoc sidekick guy that's nowhere in the game discovers for some reason Amy Rose slumming it out before she actually got noticed by Sega to be in a real decent platformer that washed up on the beach. Except that they're pirates, they shouldn't be on the beach, they should be out at sea doing pirate thing. If they're on the beach, that doesn't make them pirates, that makes them landlubbers. Amy Rose hands Havoc and company, who's not in this game, a quest to find the one magical emerald she was entitled to by Sega before she happened to join Sonic Team, from the evil pirate Bernardo, who you can tell is the main antagonist of the game because he's the first boss. Okay, he comes back later, but it's weird he's also the first boss. I don't quite get it. Also, it appears that she nurses tiny clone Havoc. Yeah. Now Havoc must rescue his tiny clone and Amy Rose from being kidnapped by evil pirate Bernardo, who he defeats in the first level, which wouldn't logically mean that he's already completed his objective. Also, the game has totally forgot about the magical Chaos Emerald and doesn't really seem to have any import in the story because this was a well thought out plot. Yeah. The story to High Seas Havoc is, well, let's be honest, this game was planned for the arcade. I'm not sure if it actually came out. According to GameFAQs, it was canceled, but it kind of forgets it has a story immediately and doesn't have anything between the start and the end. And there's not really any storytelling in the world itself, aside from maybe one area that's a city on fire that's maybe being besieged by the pirates. But the fire's also magical, so they're magic pirates who can control flame monsters, I guess. The story is definitely not the focus here, let's just be honest. The focus is gameplay, which starts out kinda sort of on the right foot, then immediately stumbles with its Sonic-esque speed, and falls right off a cliff into a bottomless pit that kills it instantly. You'll be seeing that a lot in this game, I'm afraid. Now, the gameplay to High Seas Havoc is very reminiscent of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, at least insofar as there are 2 acts to every stage, and then very reminiscent of Bubsy insofar as it's a game that has a lot of momentum, much like Sonic the Hedgehog, but also has very little horizontal area to actually utilize it, and a lot of verticality, thus wasting all of that horizontal movement speed you've built up, and a lot of instant death that comes out of nowhere mainly because you run headlong into it and die. But to Bubsy's credit, at least he got a glide to kind of get you around some of the problems. Havoc doesn't even have that. But that's just where the start of his problems are. Havoc is a game that can really be played with one button. He can jump. He doesn't really have any traditional attacks. He can Goomba stomp enemies if he jumps on them, but his main attack is an aerial bicycle kick, which has a hitbox that's barely in front of him, and more or less you may as well just jump on enemies because the hitbox isn't going to hit anything. This also means, however, that because you have to trigger this in the air, the only way to attack enemies is while you're jumping. This means that enemies that come at you from the ground are basically impervious to running headlong into them. While there isn't any direct momentum in this game, he does move very, very fast, and the controls are fairly slippery. That's a terrible combination, especially in a game that might require a lot of precision platforming. And oh yeah, there's a fair bit of it in this game. But you know what's worse than precision platforming when combined with slippery controls and not a way to attack enemies that might be coming straight at you? Blind jumps. Oh, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. Blind jumps that have a lot of instant death around them. And yeah, there's so much of that in this game. If they just had less blind jumps in this game, it would be a far more manageable experience, and it would actually be kind of a good experience. Honestly, that pretty much covers the game in general from its gameplay experience. It's a lot of blind jumps with slippery controls and instant death. It is not a very forgiving game. Again, they did plan at least at one point for this to be an arcade game, so maybe it's a remnant of that design ethos, you know, make the game as hard as possible to get as many coins as possible as quickly as possible, but it really hurts the experience. It doesn't feel like its rude gameplay design is because of players' inexperience and just a need to get better. It just feels like it requires a lot of heavy trial and error, and that's just not good. Likewise, there are things about this that just don't make a ton of sense from a player-friendly perspective. Like I said, similar to Sonic, there are 2 acts to every world, right? And because every world has its own unique obstacles, enemies, and things to deal with, which is very cool to its credit, in a sensible game, you would think that the first act would be used as sort of a test environment. You expose players to these obstacles and these new concepts in a relatively safe environment so that they can just go and experience it, and then have the second act really test what they know. And then by the end of the game, maybe have players experience all of it at once as a final gauntlet. Well, the last level in, if you're playing on the easiest mode, is a flaming town, which I feel like is the only level in this game that has any sort of storytelling in it, because at least we're going through a destroyed environment. Maybe this was a place that was ransacked and we need to stop them, in spite of the fact we've already stopped Bernardo before, provably, and somehow didn't finish our mission because this game was really well thought out. I'm thinking in hindsight they just made the first boss into the story's main antagonist because he was the most memorable, but then decided not to make him a different boss later on, and then just reused him in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. Either way, when you're in this flaming town, the game design ethos is kind of reversed. The first stage of it is this auto-scroller where you're chased by a big angry flame ball that will kill you instantly if you touch it. So you have to work your way through this environment while being chased by this instant death wall behind you, trying to interact with all these new things. You have to interact with these spritzing machines that'll attack other fires so that you can move safely through. For me, who understood that the big flame ball behind you was instant death, I thought the flame balls in front of me were also instant death. Because obviously they want you to put out the fire in front of you before you move on, and that's not the case. If things are really grim, you can tank damage from the flame balls in front of you just to get a little bit ahead of the fire behind you. Unfortunately, they don't teach you this. And the second act is much more chill. It allows you to go at your own pace and take out these fireballs the same way. So it makes me almost feel like these were reversed in the way that they should be, but this is a Data East game, so who knows? It's at the very least reversed in a way that makes any sort of sense in a player-friendly environment. One big difference between Sonic and Havoc is he has a health bar instead of rings, and he can pick up food to refill that health bar. Unfortunately, that health bar is basically useless because the biggest threats in this game aren't enemies that do damage so much as instant death pits, spikes, instant death walls behind you, lots of falling at blind jumps. Yeah, you're nowhere near as likely to die from just reducing your health to 0 as you are just to blindly flat out die. It should also be noted that this game has an incredible amount of recoil. Anytime you take damage, you are sent flying back and you're basically stunned. And you're more often than not going to fall into an instant death pit because of it. So if you get hit in a jump, you're pretty much always dead, guaranteed. The amount of recoil in this game is just obnoxious and really does nothing to benefit the game. Again, I think this might just be because this was a game that was considered for arcades at least at one point. Because this is just cruel. It really is. I've seen myself get chained by multiple attacks in a very risky jump sequence, only to end up in a pit where I had no control for several seconds. Like, this game is just really rude. The sad thing here is Havoc is just kind of a mess because of a lot of really simple mistakes, and even one or two very basic rudimentary changes could have made it a far more playable game. Give Havoc a basic attack so that he can attack while running, so he can utilize his slippery speed so he can actually get around without dying half as easily, or running off a cliff. Get rid of all the blind jumps and the precision platforming. Reorder stages so that you're at least training players before giving them the big challenge, as opposed to giving them the big challenge first, and then giving him the baby mode stages. There's just so many things here that feel like if they just tweaked it a little, it could be a substantially better game. And it just isn't. The overall presentation to High Seas Havoc is probably the high point. Visually, it's quite nice. It's very colorful, and I mean, that allusion to Bubsy earlier, I had a point to it, other than just the game was designed kind of like early Bubsy stages, and that's because this game is full of personality. If Havoc runs into spikes, he'll actually stop for a moment and actually check his pants because it turns out they got punctured and they're leaking water because he's a seal. That's funny. There's a few moments like that where there's just cute visual puns, and it kind of works. Aside from the fact that sometimes they actually interfere with gameplay by stunning you, more often than not will get you killed. Looking at the title screen, there's almost a sort of top-down Mode 7 effect to the sky. This is really visually quite impressive. The background scrolling, the enemy design, everything here is visually quite a treat, but you're probably so focused on trying not to die that you won't notice it. And it's a real shame because there is a lot of really cute animation and really beautiful environments to go around. Audio-wise, this is the definition of hit or miss. For one thing, we have voice clips similar to Bubsy and they're obnoxious. But not even in the obnoxious way that they're telling dumb puns, just sort of really crunchy, bad sound effects every time you collect an item. It goes woohoo, and you're like, ugh, it's not good. In terms of music, however, it goes one of two ways. Whenever a song has a lot of high energy, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, only about half of them have that. The other half of them are entirely forgettable, and some of them just have some really terrible sound output, like it's staticky and crunchy, and just, you would use those as examples of exactly how much worse the sound chip was on the Genesis than the Super Nintendo. This game is not doing you any favors with those songs, and it really seems to only hit its stride when the songs are taking a more energetic, adventurous tone, and it's a shame that it doesn't lean into that more. Overall, the presentation has some high highs, but it has equally low lows, and it feels like there's more lows than highs by the end, and it leaves me just kind of feeling sad overall. Now, if you want a copy of High Seas Havoc on the Sega Genesis, cheapest copy I see right now is $70 with shipping, which brings it to a total of $110. Ouch. Also, if you're in Nepal territory looking for this game, it was available under the name Havoc, and I have to say, while it's more expensive, the cart for this looks awesome, and it makes my Genesis cart look like a total nerd by comparison. Look at this, it's got such a neat shape. If that cart was translucent green with that shape, you'd almost think it was trying to emulate the Chaos Emerald that was mentioned in the plot and never comes up again. I don't know, it's just a shame they have such an interesting cart. Well done, Codemasters, for coming up with that cart design. I am jelly. But either way, at this price, regardless of which version you're looking at, it is nowhere near worth it. Even if this game was, competently made with all the changes that would actually have made this an approachable, decent platformer, it is not worth that money. And sure, you could make the argument basically all Genesis games cost $100 now, which is absurd and I hate it, but High Seas Havoc is not one to look out for at this price. This is a game I would only recommend at like budget prices because of how rough it is. It's a Data East game and it feels like it. It's badly made and it just makes me sad that a game that looks this cool and initially starts out kind of fun falls flat on its face basically instantly. But I guess you can't remove the Data East stink from everything that isn't Trio the Punch. Or, who knows, maybe they were taking way too many cues from Bubsy and thought, let's make a bad game. Worked for Bubsy.
I like it!